is Michaela Rainsall, and I am writing this letter to tell you that this chemo that I'm on is killing my body and I cannot take it anymore. I know that what I have can kill me, but I don't want to die in a hospital on chemo, weak and sick.
Tragic. Makes me very angry too. Welcome back to the arena. I'm Michael Coran, and that was Michaela Sewell, 11-year-old native girl. She's gone. She's dead. She was taken off chemotherapy, an 80% success rate, by the way, with her particular illness. And her family allowed her to, they encouraged her to do this. They wanted her to go to an alternative native medical treatment, diets and sweetgrass. It was down in Florida. This is only a few weeks ago. We covered the story when it broke, and she's gone. So what price? The life of a young girl who happens to be Aboriginal. Legal expert Rachel Siegel joins us. It's absolutely tragic, and she's reading this letter, which obviously she didn't write. Mm-hmm. And she says she saw Jesus, and Jesus said, you're healed. And I mean, on so many levels, the family, the judge, our terrified, politically correct culture, we should be protecting the vulnerable, and instead we didn't, and she's now dead.
Yeah, and there's so many aspects to this story when it comes to the legalities of the issues in it. I should highlight there are two stories here. There's Michaela and another minor. So the court case we saw a couple of weeks ago was actually with regards to the other minor. In this case, specifically with Michaela, her family did not go to court on this issue. Her family went to Child Aid, and Child Aid decided that the family was supportive enough that they would not pursue the issue and allow her to stop the
But it was still a judgment. They made a judgment.
They did make a judgment, just not in a court of law like we saw a few weeks ago.
Yeah, that was a different case.
Right. Under the law, a child age 11 is not old enough to consent to stopping that chemotherapy. So this was a decision on behalf of the parents. So when you talk about, you know, the video we just saw of her, right, like what role did that play in making this judgment? Ultimately, legally, nothing. Another question was, you know, whether or not she understands this concept of death. And earlier today, we saw Dr. Brett Belchek talk about this issue and having patients who are minors, who are so young, like this girl, understanding this concept of death. So we'll take a look at that.
They, as a minor, have to understand the implications of their decisions. So when I speak to a minor who says, I don't want care, they have to fully, in a mature adult fashion, say, I get what this is going to end up in. So her only answer that would have said she's competent to withdraw herself from care would have been she understood that she would die without this treatment. She never gave that answer. She was convinced she would live. So she didn't understand the implications, which means that she shouldn't have had the ability to make her own decision there. The other scenario is she did understand the decision or the implications of the decision that she would die, and she was suicidal. And equally in our medical care system, we say somebody who is suicidal is now deemed incompetent under the Mental Health Act to make decisions, and we take the right away from her. So either she didn't understand and then she's not capable, or she did understand and she's suicidal. One way or another, the fact that we let her make this decision is not appropriate.
That's very well put. I just want to ask a question before I forget. Did they both cases, they went to Florida?
Yes.
Was it the same institution they went to?
Yes. So it was an institution called a Life Transformation Program.
It's quite expensive.
Right, which was ultimately, an investigation was done and they were found to be a massage establishment. But the case that we saw a couple of weeks ago with the other minor, who is still alive to this day, we saw the question of Aboriginal rights and traditional Aboriginal medicine. So under our Constitution, in Section 35, it gives the right for Aboriginal community to practice customs that took place before, you know, the existence of settlers in Canada.
Yeah, I understand that. I mean, the cases are very similar, though. I mean, they're both suffering. They both had a very good chance of. I mean, we should emphasize this in both cases. And the other girl is still alive, but in this case, the doctor said similar. I mean, you can't guarantee, but they thought they could keep her alive. There was no reason. Chemo is always difficult.
Right.
I mean, it's poisoning the body effectively, but it's a means to an end.
Yeah, and today we saw the parents of Michaela come out and say that this was actually a result. She suffered a stroke yesterday, a result of the chemotherapy. Ultimately, medical experts have come out and said, you know, this was a reoccurrence of the leukemia and not as a result of the
Well, how long ago did they take her off the chemo?
It was a few months ago. I believe it was before last summer. So she's been off of it for many months. This other girl, the other minor that we're talking about, has only been off of it now for a few weeks.
It was, I think, just before Christmas, wasn't it?
Right.
We covered that
November,
case.
yeah.
And when we did, we spoke about this earlier case. I mean, this one tended to fall to the background, but we said it was a second time.
Yeah.
Whether it's a judge in a court, whether it is effectively a judge at a human rights hearing, it is someone saying, we believe this is appropriate.
Yes.
It's the assumption that doctors are somehow trying to keep this child in chemo for their own sake. They're not making any money out of it, for goodness sake. But the people in Florida,
Right.
I assume, are.
Yeah, and going back to this question of Aboriginal medicine, I mean, we can question if this case was contingent on the use of Aboriginal medicine, why these parents decided to take their children down to Florida and have that happen. When we talk about the judge specifically, I just want to highlight, you know, we task these judges with working in the best interest of the child, but at the same time, we have to remember we have laws in this country, and we have a very strong constitution, and under that constitution, it does say that there are certain rights that the Aboriginal community in this country is entitled to, and one of those rights is to have the choice of whether or not to use traditional Aboriginal medicine.
But it also gives protection to children, very strong protection.
Yes.
And in this case, it wasn't even a judge. I mean, unless we use the word broadly, I mean, it was someone who judged the situation. But there was still a person in authority, and they made the decision that it shouldn't go to a higher court. Frankly, I don't think the result would have been any different, as we saw in the other case.
Right, exactly. And so, I mean, the question is, what responsibility does Children's Aid have to protect this child? And obviously that responsibility is fully on them. In this case, they felt that the child's parents being a support system was more important than pulling her out of this home. Whether or not that was the right decision, I mean, ultimately we've seen what has happened in this case. I think moving forward, we have to look at whether or not that was the right decision, and if not, what we're doing to rectify that and make sure that it doesn't happen in the future.
I can't believe the parents were abusive. I don't think they were in the case we discussed just a few weeks ago.
Yeah.
But they're wrong.
Right.
And being completely misguided in your care of a child may not be explicitly abusive, but the results are the same.
Well, one of the other questions is whether or not this case that we saw a couple of weeks ago was being used as a precedent to highlight Aboriginal rights in this country.
Good point.
And whether or not, you know, jeopardizing the best interests of that child can be balanced with setting that precedent.
Well, the case we saw a few weeks ago was very much a succession to the earlier case, and this poor girl is dead now, and I am certain we're going to see more in the coming months and coming years, and we have to come to some sort of resolution.
Yes.
Tragic. Thank you very much indeed.
Thank you.
Want to know what you think about this case, the other case? That girl, thank God, is still alive. Let's hope it continues that way. But where do we stand? Protection of children and the protection of Aboriginal rights. Facebook.com, Sun News Network, Twitter, email. We want to hear from you.